Against the training yard dust, the kinetic impact snapped his head back with a sickening crack. A 9-foot Vasker warrior had just driven a ceramic-plated fist into his jaw, force enough to shatter bone. On my medical slate, the human's readout remained completely flat. No heart rate spike. No cortisol flood. Darius Vance simply stood there, his biological signature indistinguishable from the dirt beneath his boots. Would you flinch if a 9-foot warrior shattered your jaw? Or would you just wait to see if his pulse spiked first? That same terrifying silence. I had first registered it 3 hours earlier at the intake desk. As a newly promoted high overseer, I relied heavily on my scanner array to compensate for my lack of field experience. When Vance processed through Apex Prime Bastion, my system categorized him immediately. Class 9 recruit. A low-tier diplomatic filler. His narrow frame barely reached the chest level of the standard intake desk. The biometric data slate they handed him was wider than his own shoulders. The training yard smelled intensely of ozone and vaporized sweat. Strike Contingent 7 consisted entirely of elite Vasker veterans. Massive, lethal. Their skin markings glowed a steady, confident command blue. Into this brutal killing floor stepped the Terran. He ignored the towering giants completely. Instead, he found an oversized ceramic combat blade abandoned on a bench. From his utility pocket, he retrieved a thermal sharpening stone. With rhythmic, deliberate strokes, he began filing the heavy hilt down to fit his smaller grip. Nervous, subservient busywork. I logged his repetitive behavior under standard prey species responses. He was instinctively trying to look small. The thermal stone glowed faintly, casting a warm orange reflection against his pale, unreadable face. He filed and filed. Around him, the Vasker slammed heavy ordnance into reinforced targets, the shockwaves rattling the observation glass. He never looked up. Complete situational disconnect. My training manuals called it Class 9 shock paralysis. His primitive brain had simply shut down to cope with the overwhelming threat. Draxos finally noticed the anomaly. The contingent's top close-quarters fighter dropped a massive plasma rifle onto the dirt. Across the yard strode the giant, his blue dermal markings flaring bright with sudden aggression. He issued a formal dominance challenge. A guttural, chest-rattling roar that vibrated the weapon racks along the perimeter. Vance kept filing. The thermal stone scraped harshly against the dense ceramic. Only when the Vasker stepped directly into striking distance did the human finally pause. Came the strike. Fast. Unforgiving. Draxos hit him 3 times in rapid succession, a devastating combination to the ribs, the left shoulder, and finally, the jaw. That final blow should have snapped his neck. Dust plumed around them. I gripped my console, waiting for the trauma alerts to blare. 0 alarms triggered. Vance calmly spat a dark clot of blood onto the scorched earth. He tilted his head, looking up at the towering alien. He pointed directly at Draxos's planted right foot. "You dropped your heel," Vance stated, his tone flatter than the medical monitor. Telegraphed the whole sequence. "Fix your stance." Then, he went right back to filing his blade. Draxos froze mid-breath. The entire yard felt perfectly, unnervingly silent. I checked my primary data slate again, furiously tapping the glass screen to clear what had to be a malfunction. It wasn't broken. The Terran wasn't exhibiting shock paralysis at all. The Vasker warrior, deeply confused by the absolute lack of a chemical fear scent, backed away slowly. His glowing markings shifted momentarily toward a pale, unsettled gold before he forced them back to command blue. 3 days later, the reality of the universe caught up with us. Strike Contingent 7 deployed to the Void Fringe. A dead zone of shattered asteroids, suffocating darkness, and deep space static. I marched cautiously behind the heavily armed Vasker vanguard, my scanner array running continuous threat diagnostics. Beside me walked Vance. He carried only a standard maintenance kit and a spare oxygen cylinder. He still registered as a biological flatline on my tactical HUD, an empty space in the data stream. Beside an overturned cargo hauler, the Terran stopped. He pulled a standard-issue ration heater from his webbing and tapped the side casing. The digital gauge flashed a minor calibration error. He exhaled a sharp, annoyed breath over a 3-degree temperature variance. Dropped from the cavern roof a dozen weavestalkers. Silent, fluid, starving. Chaos instantly fractured the elite unit. Beside me, Draxos froze. The giant warrior's bioluminescence betrayed him entirely. His confident command blue rapidly degraded into a terrified, pulsating, unsettled gold. He dragged air into his lungs in shallow, panicked gasps. Against predators that hunted exclusively by tracking biochemical terror signals, his massive physical strength meant absolutely nothing. The scent of Vasker fear flooded the cavern. Forward stepped the Terran. Into the center of the slaughter zone he walked, completely unarmed, leaving the trembling Vasker behind. The lead weavestalker whipped its eyeless, sensory-pitted skull toward him. It tasted the recycled air. It probed the empty space for a thudding heartbeat, a sudden cortisol spike, a microscopic involuntary flinch. It needed fear to lock onto its prey. Nothing, just flatlines. Looking at my slate, the terrifying truth finally clicked into place. In the training yard, Vance had never experienced Class 9 shock paralysis. He simply hadn't registered Draxos as a lethal threat. He lacked prey instincts entirely. The weavestalker recoiled, shifting its spiked limbs into a rigid, non-hostile recalculation stance. It could not categorize the human as food. Vance nudged the paralyzed monster with his boot. "Go away," he muttered, as if dismissing a stray dog. The pack fled into the dark. Within the sterile metal halls of Shattered Hub 9, I initiated emergency diplomatic protocols. I slammed the Terran's heavily redacted military file onto the negotiation table. "You didn't just survive the apex predators on your world," I said, staring at the small humans sitting opposite the Vasker High Command. "Your species systematically hunted them to total absence." "We did," Vance replied, leaning back in his oversized chair. "Then we brought a few of them back as a hobby. Good for keeping the reflexes sharp." I officially dismissed the Class 9 designation. As High Overseer, I logged him simply as Darius Vance, Forward Contact Lead. The entire Vasker hierarchy remained perfectly silent. From his utility pocket came the thermal sharpening stone. He set it down gently on the cold metal table. Its heated core glowed a faint, steady orange in the dim diplomatic chamber, casting long shadows across the walls. Draxos stood entirely still in the far corner, keeping his hands away from his weapons. The ceramic blade rested beside the stone, filed down to a perfect, lethal edge. The warm light reflected off the human's unblinking eyes.